Eugene Deal was shown a six-pack, and Eugene Deal picked out photograph number 1 is looking like the Nation of Islam looking. Eugene Deal picked photo number 1 is looking like the Nation of Islam looking person. So here's that photograph. He picks out that guy.
Let's get to the nitty-gritty. Eugene's interview.
Okay, so Eugene Deal's interview. This takes place on the 27th of March. So this is almost 3 weeks, almost 3 weeks after, whatever, 18, 19 days after. And in the audio recording, you hear Detective Felix. He calls up Eugene Deal. Hey, Eugene, man, I've been trying to get a hold of you. We need to talk to you. And Eugene's like, dude, I'm not that hard to find. And they're like, well, we haven't been able to track you down, but we need to talk to you. So they do a telephonic interview, and that's what this one is. This is the first actual interview of Gene, almost 3 weeks later. So of course, there's been a lot of talk,
right,
amongst everybody. Presumably, we'll see. So Eugene Deal, he goes on, talks about, again, everything that preceded the shooting. And he says, while they were standing in the parking lot, he observed a Nation of Islam guy standing in the parking lot watching them. He described the guy as male black, 5'8" to 5'10", 20 to 30 years old. By the way, at this time, Amir Mohammed's 37. So at this time, the guy that he ultimately down the road will say is the guy doesn't match this description. But again, it's just a matter of, maybe 7 to 10 years. Mm-hmm. So he says he's 5'8", 5'10", medium complexion, close cut hair, dressed in a blue suit, white shirt, bow tie. Blue suit, white shirt, bow tie.
This would have been around the spot where they saw the striped shirt guy and where they saw the bow tie guy. So, and this is where, right around here, is where in the video I posted, the home video, where you see the guy in the striped shirt, he's basically standing like right here, looking this way. And this is where Puff Suburban is sitting in the video, because the people that were filming were right over there, where that truck are parked. So they were in a minivan parked across the street, filming this way. So this is where you see Puff in the Suburban, and you see Deal climb into the back seat. They're like ready to go, and Big Suburban was still somewhere inside. He was out of view. You couldn't see it on the camera, but he was still kind of loading up. And they pulled away, going north on Fairfax.
Now, Deal focused on the Nation of Islam guy because of his previous experience in dealing with their security. Right? So he's saying, he's telling the cops, I focused on this guy because I've got previous experience with these guys when they work security. Says the Islam guy looked at them, walked towards them, walked towards them, and then went northbound on the sidewalk towards where the shooting takes place. Right? So he disappears out of view, out of the parking lot, heading up towards the intersection. But obviously it's a long way up to the corner. And you can't see that if you're in the parking lot. Because you can't, you can't see down the sidewalk. Anyways, so Eugene goes on, talks about everybody getting in the cars and all the stuff that he was doing. He says that he got Tony and Anthony Jacobs got in the very back seat, and then Eugene Deal gets a seat directly behind Puffy. So Eugene's behind Puffy, who's in the front passenger seat. Eugene Deal is directly behind him in the passenger seat. Says that they drove, and then they proceeded through a flashing red light. There's no flashing red light, but this is his memory. Right. And he went through proceeded through a flashing red light. And the driver of Biggie Suburban stopped at the light. Then he and Tony were looking back when Tony, Anthony Jacobs, who's in the last seat in the very back of the Suburban, yells and says, somebody's pointing a gun at Biggie's car out the window. Eugene Deal hears a gunshot, at which time the driver, Ken Story, accelerates forward, past the intersection. So they start yelling at Ken Story, what are you doing? What are you doing? And of course, Tony's in the back going, they're shooting it big. They're shooting it big. He then heard 4 or 5 more gunshots. Eugene Deal heard 4 or 5 more gunshots. Deal could not see the shooter or his face, but did observe a chrome-plated gun point out of a 1997 Impala that was either gray or bluish. So Eugene Deal says in his first telephonic interview, we went through the intersection, heard shots, accelerated further up the street, and then I look back, I can't see. Now, of course, it's night. You're not going to ever be able to see inside a car through the front windshield from that distance at night. So he says he never sees the driver, but he does see what's outside the car, which is, he believes, a chrome handgun. And he says the vehicle, he doesn't describe the vehicle, he just says he says it's a 97 SS Impala that's either gray or bluish. Of course, lighting is affecting everything. Gregory G. Money Young, and Little Cease, it's green. Other people that are further away, I know it's black. You've got Eugene Deal saying it's gray or bluish. And then, of course, on the 911 tape from inside of the vehicle that's on the way to the hospital, you hear them say it's aqua blue or aqua green. They say aqua, which is bluish green, right? Deal stated that the shooter's vehicle was parked on the corner of Fairfax Boulevard in Wilshire. Of course, we've already established that can't be the vehicle because everyone else is saying the vehicle pulled up alongside them. And so if it pulls up alongside them and they're either at Wilshire Boulevard or they're one car behind Ken Story in the first Suburban, if that vehicle is over here on the corner, right, it's either going to be shooting backwards from a considerable distance or it's going to be shooting straight across. But it's definitely not going to be pulling up because that's completely different activity. That's different actions. If the car's parked there, it's not pulling up. As a matter of fact, you're pulling up, right? And it's adjacent. So there's no reason to believe that this car shot across from a parked position, right? And now if the vehicle's moved, it can only go forward, which puts it into the intersection, further away from Biggie's vehicle. Right. So, but Deal believes, for whatever reason, this is his perceptions, that the shooter's vehicle is parked at the corner of Fairfax and Wilshire. Well, it's physically essentially impossible. But again, not criticizing, critiquing. Right after the shooting, this is important again. So this is 3 weeks after the fact. He says, right after the shooting, Little Cease told him that the shooter had a bow tie. Little Cease has never said there's a bow tie, right? Little Cease never said in any of his interviews he's bow tie. The only one that says there's a bow tie is Gregory Young. But Eugene Deal is saying that Little Cease told him that the shooter had a bow tie. Hold that thought because we're going to have more on that coming up. So that's his original interview, essentially the summarization of his original interview. And then you go into his next interview, which is almost 6 weeks after the shooting. This is on April 22nd. Biggie shot on March 9th. This is April 22nd, 6 weeks later. And this time he's getting interviewed by 4 detectives, Cooper, Katz, Ito, and McCartan. So he goes on, and in this one, he's talking about what happened at the Soul Train Awards. He says that, Biggie and the people that were with him at the Soul Train Awards were left after the award presentation. Puffy and Eugene Deal stayed until the end of the show. Biggie and his people had left. And when they were leaving the award ceremony, some Nation of Islam members stopped Puffy at the door. And the Nation of Islam, an unknown Nation of Islam member said to Puffy, "I want to talk to you because you're disrespecting the brothers in the East." Puffy asked Mustafa, who's nearby, "Hey, tell this cat that everything's cool." And Mustafa puts his hand out, and that's when the conversation ended. Now, Deal believes that when the Nation of Islam members are working security for people other than Nation of Islam members, they are half-assed. This is his quote. The Nation of Islam guys are half-assed. And now you've got a conflict the night before Biggie shot with Nation of Islam guys, and Deal thinks that they're a bunch of half-assed idiots. Or at least he says they're half-assed, whatever that might be. I threw in idiots, I shouldn't have. But you can see that, when you listen to Eugene Deal's interviews, he has disdain, because things had happened back in New York. He's got this little conflict at the Soul Train Awards. And then, so of course, when he sees another Nation of Islam guy that he thinks is working security at the Peterson, it would make sense that he's got his radar on that guy. So that's what he has to say. He goes on, he says, when they left the party, they were in the parking lot taking pictures and talking to girls for about a half an hour. Biggie and the rest of the group, blah, blah, blah. And they were just standing around. And when Deal saw a person that looked like he was from the Nation of Islam walking through the parking structure, the Nation of Islam person was wearing a blue suit. Moments later, Puffy tells him, "Let's get out of here." Now, as everyone entered their vehicles, Deal stood by the truck. He stood by the truck because he was looking around for other Nation of Islam members because they never work alone. But he did not see any other Nation of Islam members. The Nation of Islam member had a blue and white, had a member in blue. Okay, I'm sorry. So this is not written well. The Nation of Islam member in the blue suit had a white handkerchief in his hand, and he started to walk northbound on Fairfax towards Wilshire Boulevard. The possible Nation of Islam member walked about 5 feet from Deal when he noticed he was wearing a medium blue suit, white shirt, a bluish green bow tie, and he had a football head with a receding hairline, 5'9" to 160, 180 pounds. Has a mustache, had a light mustache, and was about 26 to 35 years old. So now he's gone from 25 to 30 to 26 to 35. Deal shifted his attention away from the Nation of Islam guy at that point. And then the next day, it's the next day. So after the shooting, the following day, Gene Deal says that Paul Offord told him that a guy from the Nation of Islam killed Biggie. And the description matched the Nation of Islam guy, Eugene Deal. Well, did it? No, it didn't. Not really. There's a lot of discrepancies in the descriptions. Suits are different colors, different types of thing. And of course, we already know that Gregory Young and Cease, like, shit, we couldn't really make anything out. We saw a glimpse of something. So he says that, that's basically it. He says that Paul Offord tells tells Eugene Deal, hey, it was a Nation of Islam guy that shot Biggie. Deal's vehicle was the first vehicle in the caravan in Kenny was driving. Kenneth Story says they drove through a flashing red light without stopping. So he says they just went north on Fairfax and just went right through the intersection against a flashing red light, right? Mm-hmm. So Tony, who was in the rear seat, started yelling, "You're leaving Big and them at the light." And then Tony yelled that someone was pointing a gun at Biggie's vehicle. Numerous shots were fired, but Kenny was driving too fast. So Kenny eventually turned the vehicle around in an attempt to go help Biggie. But the shooting was over. This is important. This is what Eugene Deal says. He says the shooting was over and the suspect vehicle was gone by the time they had reached him. So by the time they get back to vehicle, Eugene Deal saying the car's gone. And Eugene Deal says he did not see the suspect's car. He says, I did not see the suspect's car, but Tony did. And Tony said it was like an SS Impala. Deal felt that the suspect's car was parked at the light with the headlights on because as they had been driving north, he caught a glimpse of a vehicle with headlights on at the curb. That's his whole thing. He says, I think it was the car at the curb because when we passed by, I saw a car with headlights on parked at the curb. Not sure why you then believe that's the vehicle if you didn't see the car. The first car at the car with the headlights on was the first car parked on the east curb closest to Wilshire Boulevard. So again, we go back to the diagram. We show the dynamics of everything. That car can't be the car unless it's shooting across a lane of traffic, but it can't pull up alongside, which everybody else says had occurred.
Right.
Right. So it's pretty evident that the car at the corner, whatever, was not the car. Another car, the green Impala, pulls up from another location. We don't know if it was parked way back on the curb and they had passed by and then it pulled out and caught up with them. Was it, where it came from? We just don't really know. Here's another really important thing. This is your audience has to take this into consideration. Eugene Deals was shown the two composites of the shooting. Let me grab those real quick if I got them here somewhere. Yeah, hold on a second. So these are the two composites. First of all, here's the one that Gregory G. Money does. And then here's the one that Gregory G. Money, this one's done in Los Angeles by a composite artist in LA. And then this one's done in New York by a composite artist in New York. Of course, when you look at these things, they're far from identical, right?
Right.
Eugene Deal says that this one, I'm sorry, it's hard to do this in front of a camera.
Sorry.
I'm all backwards. So anyways, the detectives, they take these two composites, which G Money Young and Little Cease had participated in having drawn. And he says that this one is the one that looks the most like the Nation of Islam guy that he saw in the parking lot, right? So he looks at that and he says, yeah, well, between the two composites, I think that one kind of looks the most like it. So then he goes on to say, after looking at the composites, he was shown photographs from the Peterson Auto Museum security camera, but the photographs were not clear enough for him to make any identification. Of course, I have these photographs. They're from they're horrible, grainy, terrible photographs. And you can see people, you can actually see a guy in a bow tie, but it's so grainy and blurry. There's no way anybody can make a positive identification from those video surveillance pictures. It's really poor quality. But the cops went through the process. Like, here's what we got. We got these grainy surveillance camera. You want to look at them? And Eugene Deal's like, I can't make anything out. It's just too. It's not clear enough.
But hold on. Can I stop you? Is that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Gene says that the face is blurred out, and they're gonna get a clearer picture and fly him back in, so they could identify, try to make an ID.
Well, the face is it's really blurry. You can't make anything of it. But there's they had already taken these. They've taken these video footage from the surveillance cameras and taken them to the technology people, and they couldn't enhance them any better. I mean, they're just horrible. And, they're taken from a considerable distance at different angles, all kinds of lighting. It's all in black and white. The cameras don't even record in color. And so they're just horrible. And so even with enhanced attempts even with attempts to enhance it, they just don't get any better. So the detectives may have told him, like, hey man, we'll give it a try, but they didn't get any better. Deal goes on to say that the guy that he saw, the Nation of Islam looking guy that he saw at the vibe party, in his opinion, was not a real Islam guy. Says he doesn't think he was a real Islam guy because he didn't act like one and that he was alone. So in Eugene Deal's, understanding, he sees this guy. He thinks he's Nation of Islam originally and that he's working security. And then in hindsight, he says, yeah, the fact that I didn't see any other Nation of Islam guys there, and because of the way this guy was acting, I don't think he was a real Nation of Islam guy. So this is Eugene Deal's, kind of conclusions, his opinions. I don't think he was a real nation guy. I don't know, he's a lump, whatever. So, okay, so then this is critical. This is really important.
Mm-hmm.
So then Eugene Deal was shown a six pack, and Eugene Deal picked out photograph number 1 is looking like the Nation of Islam. It's not well written. Eugene Deal picked photo number 1 is looking like the Nation of Islam looking person. So here's that photograph. He picks out that guy. That's who Eugene Deal says looks like the individual that he saw in the parking lot at the Peterson. Okay?
Okay.
That's who he originally, and this is back, early on. This is back in just a month or 6 weeks later. It's like, of all the people that you've shown me, that guy looks the most.
And I believe, does he have a mustache?
He does.
Okay.
They all have mustaches. Every single person in this photograph has mustaches because in all of Eugene Deal's interviews, he says the guy has a mustache. So, of course, when they put a six-pack together to show him pictures, there is, they put mustaches on him.
And
so,
I'm sorry, can I cut you?
So, yep, go ahead.
And I don't believe there is a picture I've ever seen, to my knowledge, that Amir has ever had a mustache.
No, there's no photo. We have all of his driver's licenses over the years from the time he first applied till, into the 2000s. And Amir Muhammad, Harry Billups, is never seen in any photographs or known to ever have had a mustache.
Okay, go on.
The argument might be made. Well, he did that to disguise himself. Whatever. Whatever. Who knows what? Who knows what? Yeah. So, anyways, so that's who. It's important though because Eugene Deal picks out this guy as the looking like him, right?
Yeah.
All right. So then. That's what we get from Eugene Deal. That's it. Those are his interviews, essentially. 4 years later. So now we're all the way in 2001. Right? So this is 4 years after the murder. 4 years and 4 months after the murder. Eugene Deal gets interviewed again by the cops. Talks about all kinds of stuff, who's who in the zoo, people that they know. And he goes back when they talked about the shooting. He says, the suspect vehicle passed Big's car on the passenger side. Well, if that car's at the corner, it can't pass. It can't pass Big's vehicle, right? It's adjacent to Big's vehicle, right? So 4 years later, he's saying, well, the suspect's vehicle passed Biggie's vehicle on the passenger side. Excuse me. Yeah, an arm came out the window. He said he couldn't remember what the gun looked like. So remember earlier he says he saw the gun and it was silver. Now he's saying he can't remember what the gun looked like in this interview. Suspect vehicle had made a right turn from Wilshire onto, from Fairfax onto Wilshire. Suspect vehicle made a right turn and leaves. Kenny did a 3-point turn. They eventually chased the suspect's vehicle east on Wilshire, then made another turn, and then they made a right turn, and then the vehicle was gone. So 4 years later, now it's all, there's this chase that takes place. Eugene Deal originally says when they got back to Biggie's vehicle, the car was gone. Nobody else says that they got in a car and did any chase. Paul Offord says we did a chase, but he never says anybody else tried to. Right? Because Ken Story says he jumped out of the Suburban and went over to Biggie's vehicle. Tone says he jumped out of the Suburban and went into Biggie's vehicle. Well, by the time they've checked on Biggie, there's no way that car can be
Right.
chased. It's been gone for quite a while. So anyways, it's 4 years later. All of a sudden, this pursuit of the suspect vehicle takes place. It makes no sense, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So anyways, and he says they chased it. It made a turn, and they made a turn, and then it was gone. Okay. And then Eugene Deal, this is 2001, this is 4 years later. Eugene Deal says that he saw the guy who ultimately was Amir Mohammed. He says he saw the guy in an XL magazine article 2 years ago. So this is 2001. So Eugene Deal is saying that he had seen an article in an XL magazine where in that article he sees a photograph of Amir Mohammed. Right? So that would have put it, what, 1999? If this is in 2001, he says it's 2 years ago. So he's already now been, Amir Mohammed is on the radar in the public, and Eugene Deal sees it in a magazine. And he says, like, yeah, he saw it in the magazine. And when he looked at the guy, he's like, yeah, I'm about 80% sure that was the guy. Not a positive, not for sure. It's just like, yeah, 80%. I mean, that 4 years later, by the way. And it's after he's already picked out this guy, who looks nothing like Amir Mohammed, by the way, in my opinion. So Eugene Deal then says, the guy that I saw in the magazine, I'm about 80% sure that's the guy who did the shooting. And then he goes on and he says, Little Cease saw the guy. Well, we know that Little Cease didn't. I'm sorry. Little Cease saw the guy and told Paul. Paul told me. So it's very clear, like, what happens here.
Mm-hmm.
The only one to mention a bow tie in a Nation of Islam looking guy, potentially because of the bow tie, is Gregory G. Money Young. Gregory G. Money Young tells Little Cease. Little Cease tells Paul. Paul tells Eugene. Because remember, Little Cease never said he saw a guy with a bow tie. So this is how the corruption happens. It's Gregory Young says I saw a bow tie. He tells Little Cease. Little Cease tells Paul. Paul tells Eugene. Right?
Right.
So this is just, people talking and trying to figure out what happened and trying to draw conclusions from everybody's different version of events. So then they show him a picture of Amir Mohammed. And he, again, this is 2001, after he's already seen this picture. He's already seen this picture in XL magazine in 1999. So 2 years after he's seen this guy's picture in XL magazine, 1999, Eugene Deal says, that looks like the guy. Right? Well, years and years later, he says, no, that looks like the guy.
Right.
And remember, these words I'm using are very important. He never says that is the guy. He's saying that looks like the guy. He resembles the guy. I'm not saying it's the guy. It looks like the guy.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's important. It looks like the guy. Resembles the guy. And then that's what he writes in his, he says the subject in the photograph number 3 appears to be the guy. Not it's the guy. It appears to be the guy. These are different. So then, as we all know, Eugene Deal doubles down and he goes on a couple of documentaries, and now he's positive. Now he's like, no, it is the guy.
Mm-hmm.
But you can see the evolution of events. You can see the evolution of the story. There's no, there doesn't appear to be a car chase. He says the car's gone when they got back. And then years later, he's like, no, we chased the car. It's Little Cease told me, the guy in a bow tie. No, Little Cease told Paul. Paul told you. And of course, Little Cease heard it from G-Money. And so all this stuff is going on. You've got to understand how this whole thing evolves and then gets elaborated on. Right? So that's where we're at with that. Well, Let me just finish up real quick because I know I'm
Okay.
probably going way too far into detail, but I think it's important.
Yeah.
Like people, if people really care, maybe they'll listen to this and maybe they'll take all
Mhm.
this into consideration, and it'll help them draw their own conclusions.
Right.